Hello, my name is Thane and I like to experiment with AI art. For this video I decided to test out the new /describe feature. The describe feature is Midjourney's image-to-text tool. You write /describe, upload an image, and Midjourney tells you 4 possible prompts for generating the same image. It usually doesn't give you the exact same image, but you can sometimes get quite close. So it is a way to create images in a style that you particularly like. Or in my case, discover new phrases that either totally change the look of your images or just look very awesome. So as always, I try to find things to show you that differ from the default look as much as possible. This time I started my discoveries by going to the Midjourney website and looking at my all-time top images. I selected this whimsical house picture from version 4. I did change the aspect ratio to a different one, but used the prompts that Describe gave me. A fantasy-like painting of a castle with moonlights on top, in the style of hyper-detailed illustrations, psychedelic illustration, dark cyan and orange, tangled nests, cabin core, highly detailed realism, detailed character illustrations. A fantasy home and a dark dungeon, in the style of psychedelic artwork, hyper-detailed illustrations, Victor Nizovtsev, multilayered realism, ethereal trees, dark cyan and brown, vibrant neo-traditional. A painting of a large, glowing castle in the forest, in the style of hyper-detailed illustrations, vibrant neo-traditional, dark cyan and brown, Rococo whimsy, Wojciech haunting houses, Caricature-like. A dark house on the edge of the forest, in the style of vibrant illustrations, intricately sculpted, Celestialpunk, multilayered, colorful grotesques, light cyan and amber, precise, detailed architecture paintings. I also selected this lady in a misty forest from Test P Times in version 3 and it resulted in these prompts. A woman is walking in the middle of a forest to find her way, in the style of surrealistic fantasy landscapes, dark aquamarine and orange, Victorian Gothic, matte painting, dark cyan and green, transcendental art, concept art. A fairy walks through a dark forest with people, in the style of dreamlike surrealist landscapes, orange and green, Andreas Levers, historical illustration, dark cyan and cyan, photographically detailed portraitures, digitally enhanced. A woman in a dress walking in the forest, in the style of surrealistic fantasy landscapes, dark cyan and green, concept art, dark orange and light green, Victorian era, matte painting, Lovecraftian. A woman is walking in the forest, in the style of surrealistic fantasy landscapes, dark cyan and green, medieval fantasy, dark orange and light green, Victorian era, Lovecraftian, matte painting. This whimsical house from the version 4 alpha when only square aspect ratios were available gave me these prompts. An image of an unusual shape building in a city, in the style of old master-influenced fantasy, Victorian-inspired illustrations, pigeon core, eerily realistic, caricature-like illustrations, Lénarby, mysterious atmosphere. Illustration architecture, Paris, Europe by MJ, in the style of Brian Despain, Brothers Grimm, Carl Holso, eerily realistic, Bulbous, grey and bronze, pseudo-realistic. A small house with a high tower, in the style of dreamy, romanticized cityscapes, Baroque sci-fi, blown-off roof perspective, Victorian era, surreal shapes, Cryptid academia, grey and brown. A large building with a circular shape, in the style of Tom Bagshaw, Dutch Baroque, Victorian, Paulus Potter. This drawing of a hot air balloon from also the version 4 alpha gave me these prompts. A steampunk image with a sphere on the top, in the style of elaborate spacecrafts, subtle realism, Itam crew, soft shading, majestic ports, subtle shading, floating structures. Steampunk hot air balloon, in the style of science fiction art, heavy shading, subtle realism, piles/stacks, floating structures, light yellow and brown. An illustration of another large steam-powered object, in the style of Adi Granov, ethereal subjects, elaborate spacecrafts, contrasting balance, Bulbous, Alexei Harlamov, peculiar architecture. An image of a large, vintage-looking balloon, in the style of sci-fi art, transport core, floating structures, neo-Renaissance, subtle use of shading, Baroque, imposing monumentality. And finally this glowing sailboat in the night from version 4 that gave me these prompts. HD ship, in the style of psychedelic artwork, Baroque chiaroscuro drama, multilayered realism, tonalist skies, detailed ship sails, fantasy realism, colorful fantasy realism. The sun rising over a ship of a night, in the style of Cyril Rolando, 32K UHD, dark and intricate, detailed ship sails, colorful absurdism, tumblewave, Baroque maritime. The sailing ship is floating on the ocean, in the style of Dan Mumford, Dan Machutina, 32K UHD, Angers Psychedelic, colorful imagery, Baroque chiaroscuro, smoky background. Painting of the ocean with a tall ship, in the style of aggressive digital illustration, glowing colors, 32K UHD, Nightmarish illustrations, dark colors, Rococo, dimensional multi-layering. But if you have watched my videos before, you may have noticed I like shorter prompts and all of these are way too long for me. So I went ahead and tested out some single phrases from the prompts that I just showed you. And I selected the ones that I liked the most and all that gave me very nice looking results. And of course went and tested them on different subjects that I have used for my testing purposes before. You may notice that I did leave out color-related words and artists from the tests of this video. I did that on purpose as I have done experimenting with colors a lot recently and I may just collect some cool artists to showcase in a different video. Let me know in the comments if you would be interested in videos like that. So let's begin. Here is 30 phrases that I got from using the describe feature. You can find these and also all the other phrases that I tested out in my wiki, there is a link in the description. Let's begin with hyper-detailed illustrations. I like this style, because it mostly seems to create very intricate and detailed images. There sometimes may be a lot going on in the images, but I really like this kind of style. Architecture-related images are very chaotic too. But the style is very different from the default. Portraits and sci-fi seem to not always follow the style, at least in the images I prompted. But overall very nice looking style in my opinion. From incredibly intricate detailing we now move on to a wild and psychedelic world. Psychedelic illustration. Another style that completely takes over and has a lot going on with a variety of colors. This may just be one of my personal favorites. The explosion of colors and intricate details continue also in the architecture-related images. Out of these I think I like the sci-fi images the most. I didn't know I would ever say this, but there's actually too much going on in the fantasy images. Speaking of psychedelia, let's dive deeper into the trippy world of art with psychedelic artwork. It's strange how all these subjects look kind of distinctly different. It is a similar style to the previous one, and a lot is going on here too. Oddly, the word illustration seems to influence the Midjourney's default style enough that switching it out with artwork, it tends to produce photographic-looking images for only in the context on interiors. These look cool, but I did prefer the psychedelic illustration a little bit more. Our next topic is sure to take us on a journey to the far reaches of the imagination, so hold on tight. Ethereal trees. But I think we went back to realism more and actually get trees in a fog for at least nature images. Architecture-related images look better, we get a hint of houses in city and architecture. But the interior images look so fantastic. I would love to visit a place with a design like this. Portraits actually do a few portraits in half of the images. Fantasy is totally overpowered by trees. But sci-fi has a hint of some nice stuff in a few of the images. Moving from the surreal to the ornate, our next topic boasts a unique and intricate style that you won't want to miss. Rococo whimsy. With this style, we either get figurines or soft-colored illustrations. Again, a lot going on in the images with all the flowers and things. City seems to continue the same theme. But interior and architecture seem to depict more of the actual Rococo style. Without the whimsy, I think. And I don't know how the whimsy is presented in these portraits as well. They do look nice, but whimsy is lost. The vivid and lively world of illustrations awaits us in. Vibrant illustrations. Very colorful stuff again. Possibly more towards Midjourney's default style, just with more color. Architecture-related images kind of look like we've seen before, but I like them. Again, very detailed and very colorful. A lot less overflow of colors, but these look nice as well. I don't know about the pose on the lower left sci-fi image though. A head is not supposed to turn like that. Prepare to be transported to a futuristic, punk-inspired realm as we delve into Celestialpunk. A very wide variety of stuff we get here. Futuristic sci-fi landscapes. And kind of mechanical macro images that look a little more steampunk or clockpunk. Or even gearpunk. Nice looking images in architecture-related themes too, although this kind of doesn't feel like Celestialpunk to me. Portraits and sci-fi do look more like cyberpunk meets steampunk. Our next topic is a true masterpiece of layering and dimension, so get ready to be amazed. Multilayered. And there is a lot of layers indeed. It does look different from default mostly. For architecture-related images, I guess multiple layers mean multiple fours. City images are crazily complex and detailed again. And the same happens with fantasy and sci-fi images. Architecture with a fantasy or sci-fi styling with lots of flaws and a lot going on. Let's take a trip into a world of mythical creatures and otherworldly landscapes with surrealistic fantasy landscapes. I really like the different look and feel of the macro images. But landscape and wildlife images look awesome too. And yes, this is a style where one of my subjects does often repeat. The interiors look really nice. And city and architecture strongly continue the fantasy theme. Portraits are a bit more surreal with the cities and trees growing on the ladies' heads. And for fantasy, I guess I proved one other thing that happens if you write the same words multiple times. The landscape and fantasy themes both use the same seed, and they do look partially identical. But 50% of the images are actually different. Our next subject is a transcendent art form that seeks to elevate the viewer beyond the ordinary. Transcendental art. And there do seem to be some elevated houses, trees and villages as well as animals. I don't know what the macro images depict, but they look so cool. For some reason this word does bring in a lot of detail too in the city and architecture images. And I feel like if you include words like art or artwork, at least interior images seem to depict art hanging on the wall. The portraits look very intricate and non-traditional as well. I don't really like the style of fantasy that much. And sci-fi images seem to do a lot of the style that usually comes from this prompt. I interpret that as the default look. Our next topic is a dreamlike vision of reality, full of unexpected twists and turns. Dreamlike surrealist landscapes. There are some really nice looking images with this phrase. I have a theory that I have not yet proven, but just a hunch. That maybe when specifying something in a multiple form like landscapes have been in this case. I have noticed there being kind of a split image going on in some of the prompt results. You can see it here in both landscape and wildlife in bottom left. Architecture images look very dreamy. Especially the cities, such a wonderful mix of fantasy and surrealism. So it looks like architecture-related images actually win for this phrase, as these look good as well. But I feel like they are kind of more in the default style and not so much out there as I would prefer. Let's take a step back in time with our next topic and explore the art of the past. Historical illustration. And you can straight away ignore my theory of the split images. It might just be a seed thing or aspect ratio thing why these are showing up more. And of course this time I didn't do any corrections to the images with negative prompts. But this is a more historical feeling style based on the nature images. It has completely overpowered the macro word. Nice illustrations in the architecture-related images as well. City seems to be more intricate, interior more lifelike, and architecture is looking like a blueprint or a sketch. And the style seems to be completely ignored with the last three images. Would have liked to see sci-fi drawn like a historical illustration. From classic techniques to cutting-edge technology, our next topic blends the best of both worlds. Digitally enhanced. This style seems to give somewhat of a filtered look to the images. I especially like the wildlife images. Interior images are nothing special with this combination. I like the added color to the cities at night. And architecture stand out the most to me, they're like some kind of see-through digital sketches. The filtering theme seems to continue in the portraits and fantasy images. But for sci-fi it looks like it is getting the literal meaning of enhancing humans with robotics, I guess. Get ready to be scared out of your wits as we explore the horror-inspired world of Lovecraftian. It wouldn't be Lovecraft without the tentacly monsters. I simply love what this word has done to the images. More tentacles in the cities and interiors. Wouldn't you want to live in a house with tentacles? Okay, maybe I wouldn't, but these images still look so cool. I am guessing that is H.P. Lovecraft in these portraits with the tentacle monsters. Sci-fi seems to be really drowned out by this word, there's more tentacle monsters than sci-fi in these images. The next subject we'll explore combines classic fantasy with the influence of the Old Masters. Old Master influenced fantasy. So the landscape and wildlife images look more fantasy to me than anything else. For some reason I really like the mushrooms and the old lady in the macro images. Very nice fantasy aesthetic for the architecture-related images. One of the fantasy ladies has at least 3 legs apparently. And the horses have 4 legs each. Sci-fi is looking kind of default to me as well at this point. Our next topic is inspired by the ornate and elegant style of the Victorian era. Victorian-inspired illustrations. And the result is very nice illustrations, at least in my opinion. I really like the macro ones and wildlife ones. And the nice looking illustrative style continues in architecture-related images as well. I especially like the architecture houses. The illustration style seems to get a bit different again with these subjects. But they are still more illustrative than photographic or CGI looking. And I like that at least on one of the sci-fi images, the Victorian style is coming in strong and mixing with the sci-fi. Our next subject is a whimsical and light-hearted take on the world of art. Caricature-like illustrations. So far it seems like everything with the word illustrations in a plural form has produced at least one image with kind of several images in one. Landscape here does it for all the images. Wildlife is looking very cute. And macro has basically lost its meaning here with caricature-like taking over. For interior images we again get some split images. City images have a lot going on and so much detail. And architecture images look good, not necessarily caricature-like. Portraits seem to look obviously more caricature-like. Fantasy combination with this word is absolutely fantastic. Sci-fi looks mostly too normal for me. Just the top right image looks more caricature-like a little bit more than the rest of the images. The next topic we'll explore is shrouded in mystery and intrigue, sure to keep you guessing. Mysterious atmosphere. And these images certainly have a mysterious vibe to them. The mist does wonders, also the darkness. The cities and architecture certainly look mysterious. Again, there's some mist present. Interior images look cool, but not necessarily too mysterious. Continuing with more darkness and mist. The sci-fi images seem to have some flying saucers for once. So now let's look at a very whimsical shape with Bulbous. Certainly some bulbous-shaped stuff here. The animals look kind of weird with the bubbles attached to them. Some nice futuristic or alternate universe-looking cities with the balloons and other round objects floating there. And the architecture images are really funny too. Portraits are very weird. Fantasy just fits with this style. And sci-fi looks okay, but I've been seeing these large round objects in the version 5 sci-fi images so much that they're starting to turn boring for me already. Our next topic takes us on a journey to a futuristic world of technology and style. Baroque sci-fi. This is kind of an absurd combination, but I love it already. For landscape it seems to prefer very odd-looking cities. The animals are hilarious in their costumes. Macro is depicting some weird, unrecognizable but very intricate and ornate things. Architecture-related images seem to be losing some of the sci-fi from them. There is some nice lighting in the interior images. The portraits feel more like Baroque steampunk to me instead of sci-fi. And nice floating cities in fantasy and sci-fi. The next subject we'll explore is a celebration of surrealism and the unexpected. Surreal shapes. Very different looking landscapes. Almost like rendered in 3D. And for some reason wildlife looks totally different. And so does macro. I don't see anything in common with them stylistically. And some contrasts also with the city being very busy. Compared to more simplistic and minimalistic looking interior and architecture. Interior images look most like the landscape images did to me. Portraits feel like more cubism to me with the sharp shapes. Fantasy images look great. Sci-fi images look cool too, but they tend to again look like stuff we've seen so many times already. Prepare to be amazed by the fascinating world of cryptozoology with our next topic. Cryptid academia. Academia feels like it brings in kind of a cartoony or anime look. Wildlife seems to produce some cute studying animals. And monsters and other guys studying in macro. City does some monsters flying around. Interiors look like out of anime to me. And architecture is doing some kind of infographics about academic-looking buildings. Portraits are again half studying monsters. Fantasy brings in some adventure, as does sci-fi. Although sci-fi doesn't look that sci-fi to me, it's so similar to fantasy in this case. Our next subject is a haunting and ethereal portrayal of the world around us. Ethereal subjects. Another ethereal style, this time without trees. Again we get some mist-like and mysterious, but less darkness. Very nice and light interiors. Cities do have some mist again. I love the portraits and fantasy images. They're so pretty. And sci-fi is looking like it always does. I don't see a style difference. Let's explore the imaginative world of colorful fantasy realism. Very colorful style. I also had fantasy realism as one of the words I tested out, but this just looked so much better than that. Even the architecture-related images are so happy and whimsical. Portraits look good, fantasy is looking just fantastic, like scenes out of a fairy tale. And there's even some more color in the sci-fi images, although the sci-fi tends to gravitate towards the default style still. Now we delve into the shadows with something more complex and detailed. Dark and intricate. Total contrast to the previous style. And as promised, very dark landscapes. The intricate part comes out in the wildlife images somewhat. Very intricate detailing in the interior and architecture images. The portraits are definitely looking different than the usual ones do. The ladies are covered in very beautiful and intricate tattoos or body paint. Very awesome fantasy images too. And sci-fi is finally looking a little bit different than it usually does. Some massive machines there. Next up, we'll explore a style that emphasizes imagination and unpredictability, with a wild and sometimes nonsensical approach to color. Colorful absurdism. Back from the dark again to the explosion of color. These kind of look especially colorful to me. There seems to be more photographic style in the architecture-related images. It is a rare sight to get men on these portrait images. Very colorful face paint here. I am reminded of ice cream with the fantasy images. And finally, the sci-fi images are looking so cool and funny and different from what we usually see here. Now we'll be looking at art that uses color in a different way, creating vivid and striking visuals that grab your attention. Colorful imagery. Again, a lot of color. I like the ultra-sharp looking photo of the tree with its reflection in the upper right of landscape. Very colorful stuff in architecture-related images too. I like city images the most. And in this style we get women with very colorful face paint. Nice looking fantasy images too. And a bit more usual looking sci-fi images with a dash of color. Not sure what the lower right image is supposed to be. Let's switch gears to explore a style that is bold and intense, characterized by sharp lines and high contrast. Aggressive digital illustration. Landscapes do have really bold and intense lines. And it seems that Midjourney seems to convey the aggressiveness more as an emotion. We get really aggressive animals. And really aggressive macro images with so many sharp teeth. Strong colors and lines again in the city, interior and architecture images. And there's even one house that looks very aggressive and has lots of sharp teeth. The portraits and sci-fi don't seem to look that aggressive in terms of the emotion, more towards the visual style. But fantasy is concentrating more on the emotion with these scenes. Lots of sharp teeth again. Get ready for a visually stunning experience as we explore artwork that uses vibrant and bright colors, sometimes creating a surreal or otherworldly atmosphere. Glowing colors. And yet another very colorful style, this time with glow. The images don't even look real with these colors, although they mostly look very photographic in their style. For architecture-related images, the glowing colors obviously seem to be originating from different kinds of colored lights. The sci-fi looks okay, kind of cyberpunk feel to it. Portraits are also nice, a bit weird though with the lines on the faces. But fantasy images look amazing in my opinion. The lower left is my favorite. Buckle up as we delve into a darker and more disturbing style of art, full of unsettling imagery and a sense of dread. Nightmarish illustrations. So we end my experimentation results with a style that is surely going to haunt you. The nightmare stays true to its word here. The animals are looking very creepy, as do the macro images. I do know that some of the actually existing microorganisms look pretty scary close-up, but these go even creepier than that. The city and architecture images are not looking that bad, they're actually kind of cute. Unless you look too closely and notice some of the creepy stuff going on. That's especially the case with the interior images. The monster on the bed is cute though. But portraits go back to the creepy imagery. Fantasy is looking especially creepy with the monsters. And sci-fi as well. Definitely different from the default stuff. I hope this last nightmare didn't scare you too much and you did get a mix of different kinds of styles to test out in your own prompts. I will continue to experiment and discover stuff that I personally like, and I will always try to share my favorite discoveries with you. So if you like this kind of content and would like to see more, please consider subscribing to my channel. And I always appreciate all comments and likes too. This time let me know what were your favorite styles from this video. And let's continue prompting.